Welcome to another episode of CrossTalk, the 6th Plymouth District edition, featuring the one and only State Rep Josh Cutler.
Thanks, Kevin.
Welcome
Glad to
back.
be back.
Welcome back in studio. Welcome back to the program to give the fine folks in your district, Pembroke, Duxbury, and Hanson. How's life treating you?
Things are great. Yeah, it's good to be back. Love the fall, you know. Lots going on. The leaves changing colors.
Holidays around the corner.
Lots of football and now basketball, which I'm a big fan of. And it's busy at the State House, so it's good all around.
Which is the general purpose of why we have the state representative on a regular basis, whether it's every month, every other month, quarterly. The idea is to give him an opportunity to kind of talk about some of the things that he's working on. A lot of times we can't get him in every month because he's a busy guy. And I got a long list of stuff.
We're never too busy for CrossTalk.
Right. That is true. Probably the first thing we should probably talk about, seeing that we're still in the first half of fiscal 2018.
Yes.
Some work that was done to be able to get some money. I don't know if you had some vetoes that took place regarding the budget. Talk to us about some money you were able to gain back for your communities.
Sure. So, obviously Kevin, as state representatives, one of our most important jobs every year is to pass a balanced budget. And even though it's 2017, we're obviously already in the FY 2018 budget year because it starts in July. So we wrapped up this year's budget this summer. But one of the last steps in the process is oftentimes the governor will make vetoes or some changes that he wants to see in the budget, and we have the opportunity to let those stand, or sometimes we'll override the vetoes to restore funding. And so there were a number of items that were of a sort of local interest or regional interest here in Hanson, Whitman-Hanson, the whole South Shore. And so we were able to restore funding by overriding those vetoes and put those funds back in the budget. And so it's some good things for the South Shore. But, it's important to note, I think, to make your viewers aware that, because I get this question a lot, unlike perhaps what happens in Washington, D.C., where the budget, I don't know if they actually ever pass a budget. I think they have continuing resolutions, they call them.
Kick that can down the road. Kick it.
But so we are required to have a balanced budget every year, and we can't have a deficit. So it means making tough spending decisions and making predictions about revenue sometimes a year out can be difficult. If you're a city or town, you're trying to look ahead and see what kind of revenue we're going to have next year to make up the budget. Well, you kind of have a pretty good sense because the property taxes are the main driver of your municipal budget, and you can kind of do the math and figure that out. But when you're a state and you're relying on a myriad of different revenue sources like income tax, sales tax, corporate taxes, capital gains taxes, those are very much can be cyclical depending on the time of the year. They can be affected by national events. The changing of a president or the stock market can have a dramatic impact on sort of trickling down to us. So it's a harder thing to predict. But we have to live within our means, and so that makes it a challenge. We have, sort of budget for what we want to do, but also be recognizing that we can't do everything that we want to do. But so anyway, on a more local level, we're able to restore some funding for some things that I think are important very locally here. For instance, our ponds are a big part of what makes living here in the South Shore such a great thing. It affects our quality of life, our drinking water, recreation, and so forth. And so try to find funding for our ponds and resources for our ponds has been something I've been trying to work on really since before I was elected even. And every year we've been fighting for funding. This year we're able to get some funding for Wampatuck Pond in Hanson to do some water management testing there. Also some funding along with my colleague, Representative Cutler, for the Central Plymouth County Water District, which helps to oversee the ponds and Monpont impacting Hanson and Pembroke and the whole larger issue of our drinking water supply vis-a-vis the city of Brockton, which I know you've covered in the past. We've talked about that. So able to bring some resources back to the South Shore to help in those areas. Obviously, we still need more, but anything we can do to kind of relieve the burden of folks locally is great news. So those are a couple things. Able to make some changes to the budget in the area of Chapter 70, which is the way we fund our local school districts. One of the main ways that we get funding back from the state is for our schools is through Chapter 70, and so there's something called the minimum per pupil increment, and through the budget process we're able to get that raised up from $25 per pupil up to $30 per pupil. So again, a modest increase that helps send more money back to our cities and towns.
If I could kind of back you up,
Yeah.
wasn't it just 2 years ago that you were able to bump that per pupil up to 55? So is it set at a specific amount annually, and you have to kind of persuade your colleagues to?
So it's an excellent segue, Kevin, because it's not. It should be. So what happens is every year the budget, the first draft of the budget is issued by the governor, and he comes out with his
Correct.
budget, usually called House 1 is what we refer to it, or House 2 in the second year. And so he'll come up with a number for minimum per pupil under Chapter 70. And then the House will take up the budget, and then the Senate, and then eventually we'll come together and have a compromise and pass what we can all agree to. So it's not set in statute, and that's one of the issues that I think our local schools, rightly are concerned about, because they don't know necessarily from year to year. When the governor proposes $20, we'll try to get it higher, but we can only go so high, and it's a negotiation, and it also depends on outside sources like our revenue figures month to month, and are they trending upwards or downwards? Are there what's happening in Washington D.C.? There's changes proposed with health care. Now they're talking about changing the tax structure. Those could have dramatic differences, dramatic impacts at the federal level, but also here in Massachusetts. So we have to take those things into account. But so one of the things I've been working on aside from all this is trying to set a minimum baseline so that cities and towns will know exactly, or at least a minimum amount that they can rely on. So I actually have a bill that I filed that had a hearing just recently, and Senator Brady and I testified together. We were sitting right next to each other in support of this just recently before the Joint Education Committee. And my bill would set a minimum of $50 per pupil so that it would be set in statute, so that there wouldn't be an annual sort of debate and protracted wrangling about what it should be. Now, if there were extra revenues and we could do better than that, that would be great. This would just set a floor. It wouldn't set a ceiling. But at least it would set a floor that would be reasonable and people could count on. So that's the effort we're trying to undertake now. Obviously, it's still a piece of legislation. It has to go through all the steps, and there are other competing revenues, demands, and so it's never an easy thing. But that's where we're trying to put the focus in addition to working on the budget, because we recognize, like you say, every year it's a struggle, and so wouldn't it be easier if we could just set this and move on to other areas?
What has it been like under I believe this is your second administration right? You started under the Patrick.
Yeah, so my third term, and my first term was with Governor Patrick, and then my second and third term was, which I'm in now, was with Governor Baker. Wow, time is going by quick.
It has.
I feel it's the gray hair.
I know.
But yes, two different governors.
What the approach you've had to do as a legislative body? You've had a chance to see it yet again,
Yeah.
where you've had to make changes after it's the fiscal year begins.
Right, and people always ask about that. What's the difference between Governor Baker and Governor Patrick? And honestly, I think they both did a good job as governor. I don't. There's differences in policy, definitely.
Sure.
One's a Democrat, one's a Republican. There's definitely some changes, but from a 10,000-foot view, there's not as many differences as you might think. Largely, we have a fairly consensus-driven approach to policymaking here in Massachusetts, and we did under Governor Patrick, and we do under Governor Baker. So I have good things to say about both of them. I think they've both been effective in their own ways. So, but getting back to the partisan thing, people always assume when the governor vetoes something, well, that's because he's one party and you're the other party, and that's why it's happening. And it's not the case at all. The same things were being vetoed when Governor Patrick was in office. It really is more about the executive branch versus the legislative branch. If you get back to the cartoons you used to see on Saturday morning with the I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill, and you have the three branches of government. And
School of Rock.
I'm a member of the legislative branch, and we think that because I represent a small district and I get to know my district, I think I have a better handle on what's going on in my district than does someone in Boston. And so when it comes to spending decisions of where money should be appropriated, I think we have a good handle on that. And our views should inform how the funds are spent across the state. whereas the executive branch, I think, would prefer to have no strings attached and just they want the money that we appropriate, and they want to make all the decisions about where the money's spent. So it's sort of a natural conflict between the two branches, and it plays out. And I think it's a healthy thing. I think it's why our forefathers set up our government this way, so you'd have a natural tension between the three different branches of government, and in this case, just the two. And so the process being the process, the governor oftentimes will want to veto things, and we'll decide, well, it's our prerogative to override the veto, and we're going to make that decision for ourselves. So we do. Whether it's a Republican governor or a Democratic governor, it's really not a partisan thing. It's more of a branch of government thing.
Okay. Let's talk about a couple of other things that you've been working on. I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit here. One of them being restricting foreign influence when it comes to local elections, whether it's state and local. Now, what you were describing to me prior to our rolling the cameras is that while you might have foreign nationals that come here cannot so much put money forward, there's a loophole. And with that loophole, you're going to try to close that where corporations can't have an influence or an effect.
So yeah, exactly, Kevin. So I've been working with Common Cause of Massachusetts, which is an organization, a nonprofit that does a lot of good work in terms of bringing more transparency to elections, making elections more fair, and they were big supporters of the early voting process that we did last term. And so this is a bill that they helped to write and brought to me, and I was pleased to work with them on it and to file it and to be the chief sponsor of it. And so essentially, you explained it pretty well. I mean, it's a complicated issue, but we've seen what's going on at the national level with Facebook advertisements and Russia potentially, getting involved in our presidential election, and all the doings and goings on there. Under federal law, people who are not American citizens or permanent residents are not allowed to make contributions to our political campaigns. And I think there's good policy reasons why we as a country have decided that. We want our decisions, our funds to come from folks in the United States rather than from other countries. There's all kinds of potential pitfalls if we were to open that up to allow people from anywhere to be influencing how our elections happen. So, and that has been upheld by Citizens United and the FEC and every decision out there. So that applies to individuals, but there's sort of a loophole that allows a corporation that is influenced by foreign entities to still make campaign contributions or to fund political campaigns here at the state or even the federal level. So obviously here in Massachusetts we can't affect what's going on in Washington, D.C., but we can make changes that impact our state. And so just as we don't want, bots on Twitter making, fake ads or Facebook ads, we don't want that happening here in Massachusetts either, and having influence from, other countries trying to come in and change policy against Massachusetts' best interests. So this is a bill that would kind of close that loophole to apply the same standard that we apply to individuals, but to corporations that have 5% or more influence from a foreign entity. So it's a bit of a complicated area of the law, but the sort of summary of it is that we're trying to apply that same standard to prevent this kind of thing from happening here at the state level. And it's a good government kind of nonpartisan thing that Common Cause has really gotten behind. And I thought it made a lot of sense given what we just went through last fall. And frankly, we don't even quite know what all the details of that were, but it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary to think.
Still probing it.
Yeah.
Still probing it at this moment. What kind of support are you getting on this bill?
So far, it's been very good. I mean, it's not a bipartisan. It's a bipartisan kind of thing. I think nobody wants to see, whatever your political affiliation is, nobody wants to see decisions made. It's just like anything.
Level playing ground. Right.
Here in our South Shore, we want the voters of the South Shore to be making decisions about, our elections or elections for anything, and we don't want to see outside influences coming in and trying to spend lots of money to influence elections against. So the principle is the same, whether you're talking about a state rep, selectman, or governor, or even the national level. So so far it's been well received.
Okay. A couple of conversations you and I have had is in regards to some energy hearings that have been held. Kind of talk to us about what has come of those. I think one of them is renewable energy. Another one is in regards to solar and maybe raising the caps.
Right. So I'm a member of the the Utilities and Energy Committee. This is my second term on that committee. It's something I really enjoy kind of diving into. Energy policy is a complicated area, but obviously it's a cutting edge area. Think about renewable energy here in Massachusetts and just how far we've come the last 5 to 10 years. Just driving around, you were chatting off camera, seeing all the solar panels now that you see when you're driving around.
More so than ever.
Yeah, we're driving on the highways. And it's not just solar. Obviously, we see there's some wind around, and now we're moving more towards offshore wind, trying to put turbines deep offshore where the wind power is even greater. It doesn't come with some of the neighborhood issues. But there's other areas as well. Hydropower is a growing renewable energy. And there's cutting edge things like hydrokinetic turbines that can be put underwater or out to sea, taking account wave action. If you think, you name it, there's, scientists have figured out a way to harness almost any of Mother Nature's various gifts. It's just a question of how we can, monetize them and in a cost-effective way. Folks in Massachusetts should be proud. We here in Massachusetts, we lead the nation in terms of energy efficiency, and we're in the top 5 in terms of how many renewable energy installations we have in Massachusetts, solar obviously leading the way. So we've done a really good job of building up this new industry that now is obviously benefiting our planet and the earth, but also creating hundreds and thousands of jobs right here in our backyard. Think about all the folks that are involved in the solar industry, just for example. It's really growing fast. So one of the things that we are grappling with as policymakers is trying to balance the need to nurture the solar industry along, but also our traditional fossil fuel sources are still a big part of our renewable energy, a part of our energy portfolio. Folks can disagree about the balance that should be, but it's still a part of it. And obviously cost is a concern. When we have folks, energy costs are higher here in Massachusetts than they are in other parts of the country, and that's because, partially because we have the weather that we do, but there's other factors as well. And so we have to be mindful of all those different factors, I think. And all of us, and I included, definitely want to see us moving more towards the renewable energy. I think that's the key long-term goal, and it has to be. And I think, as renewable energy becomes more cost effective and the cost comes down, and it has significantly, we're going to get to what's called grid parity, which is where, renewable energy can compete head-to-head without any subsidy whatsoever with fossil fuels. So, how quickly we move towards that day is sort of the debate. I'm a big believer in trying to move the ball forward. But so one of the things we're running into is there are caps right now that our utility companies have in terms of how many megawatts of energy are created by solar facilities. And so we're trying to debate right now what the appropriate caps should be and whether they should be raised again. I think they probably do need to be raised again. We raised them 2 years ago.
I was going to ask about that because I know that there was a conversation a couple of years ago about raising it and the need to if they're going to keep making progress in that area.
Yeah, and so it's a sort of a victim of our own success. We raise the cap, and there are so many projects that want to go into the pipeline that it almost immediately gets filled again, and it's done by rate territory. So we're right here in the South Shore. We actually cover both National Grid and Eversource. So some of our communities are in one territory, some are the other, and so it gets a little complex with the cap because each utility company has a different cap amount. But so we're very near to the cap in most of this area, and so we don't want to prevent or curtail the solar industry from growing even more. At the same time, we want to be mindful that we can't be as generous as we were in the past, perhaps with the subsidies, and so balancing that is the tricky part. But so we had a very lengthy hearing about that from a lot of folks who wanted to opine. It was, I think, went on for 7 or 8 hours, but it was really quite fascinating. It was interesting to be part of, and it had a very South Shore feel to it because also on the committee were 3 or 4 other legislators all from the South Shore, including Senator Brady. So it's kind of nice.
Well, and it's kind of interesting that you mention we're talking solar because it gives me a perfect segue. Although I do want to kind of mention, you do see it more and more. If you're traveling down Route 44, there's a certain point where there's a bunch of panels.
Yeah, I've driven by there.
Down Route 3, you get off exit 5, right in that area there's solar panels. So more and more people are utilizing open space for solar panels, and it's even becoming something that our transportation system is using. Well, something that you and I had a conversation about not too long ago is the solar canopy coming for the town of Hanson That's something that it's going to be next year, right?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that, Kevin. That's going to be a cool thing. So the MBTA is contracted with a private company that's going to put solar canopies on many of our commuter rail stations, including here in Hanson. And so basically, if you've seen the parking lots, they're just empty parking lots. But what they're going to do is put up canopies, so you have a little, carport kind of thing, and they're going to put solar panels on top of them. And so that's going to obviously provide a number of benefits. Number one, it's going to create more renewable energy. It's going to save money because the savings is going to be passed along to the MBTA, and they'll still get some credits. And for the customer, the consumer, it's going to be nice because number one, they'll have little carports that'll be protecting them in the winter, from snow and rain and ice. There's also going to be LED lighting, so at nighttime you can see a little bit better. So that'll be nice. So it's kind of one of those win-win things, and it's a private company that's doing this. So if a panel breaks down or something happens, they have to repair it. It's not the MBTA. We have to get involved in the paneling business. They're contracting with a private company and getting the savings, much like you see at the municipal level. I know some of the towns around here, including a couple of the ones that I represent, have done that kind of thing at the local transfer station, where you put in install some solar panels and have a private company to maintain them. So that was kind of cool that Hanson's going to be part of this program, and that's going to happen, as you mentioned, next year.
Next year. I know that they did start construction, I think, in the Hull area or somewhere.
Right. So Hull was first, and they have about 30 of these.
A slew of them, yeah.
30 of them they're going to do around the eastern part of the state. And it's not just Hanson. There's some, I think the Kingston one and Halifax are included as well.
Plymouth, you name it, yeah.
Right. And so that'll all happen throughout between now and a year from now. They should mostly be done. So that'll be kind of cool.
Okay. One of the other topics that we have on our list is some reform to criminal justice here in the state. What are some of the things that we could see change in regards to a bill that'll be fashioned for reform?
Yeah, so Kevin, one of the big things that is on our docket for the fall term has been criminal justice reform, something that both the Senate President and the Speaker have been talking about for a while now. And we actually had a commission done last term by the Council of State Governments, asked them to take a look at this, sort of a deep dive into this issue, and they presented some recommendations, which we're now reviewing. And the Senate has already come up with a bill, and actually I believe they're going to be debating it this week, and the House bill is still brewing, and I think we'll be taking that up over the next 2 to 3 weeks, probably. So I think you're going to see some changes in our criminal justice approach. And again, it's the sort of constant, yin and yang, give and take, trying to get the right place. I think there's a recognition that some of our criminal justice policies have been focused more on the punitive side of it and less on the rehabilitative side of it. And I think we want to try to readjust that a little bit.
Balance?
Probably a little more balance. I think, if you look back at some of the things that were done in the 90s, maybe now that we look back with the fullness of time, we might have a different point of view. I think opiates is unfortunately a good example. I think we've learned that we can't just incarcerate our way out of the opiate addiction problem.
Right.
We have to treat it as an addiction, and people need to get help. And just locking people up isn't going to solve it. Obviously, there's people that are dealing, trafficking drugs, and for that still needs to be severe sanctions. But for folks, more on the user end of the spectrum, that's not going to work. That isn't going to solve our problems, and it's a very costly way to approach the problem. So, trying to kind of rejigger our sails a little bit is the general focus of that. And how you do that is really gets into the nitty-gritty, and that's where the debate is. And there's already a lot of healthy debate. The Senate bill is, I think there's been a lot of stories in the papers already about it, and some of the things that they're proposing, which we'll have to take a hard look at. I don't know what the answer will be, but I think you're going to see some changes around bail system, trying to make sure that we're not just incarcerating people just because they're poor. If you are charged with a crime and can't afford to make bail, you end up in jail, and you have to re-examine that to make sure that that's not that's being done in a fair way.
System.
Yeah, or there's things like felony. If someone's charged with stealing something that costs more than $250, it's a felony. That hasn't been raised in many years, and so raising the threshold for those kinds of crimes, trying to apply common sense. Smart on crime versus tough on crime. That's how I would kind of look at it. But it's one of those things that's going to be. We could probably spend a whole episode on that, and maybe we will next month after we've passed some legislation and actually have something concrete to dive into. But it's definitely something that you're going to see more of in the next month, I would say.
Okay. We've got less than 5 minutes left here, but I want to kind of touch upon, you've been busy in the district. between a special ceremony for Lieutenant Hall in Hanson. I know that you're going to be part of an upcoming event. You're an ad hoc member to the Promote Prevent, and we will talk a little bit about that, but also that you were part of a fundraiser down at a sister access center.
Oh yeah, are we allowed to mention them? Is that like a...
No. Yeah, you mentioned PAC. We share some of our shows with PAC
okay.
TV. It's one big happy.
It's one big happy... Okay, I just want to make sure, I don't want to...
No. I like. They got great staff down there.
Yes, no, they do.
Donna and Dan and
Yep, and Julie.
Julie.
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah,
Julie lives in your district.
that's right. That's why. That's right. And Maureen used to work for me, so of course I got to mention them.
All right.
And congratulations
Billy
to Maureen
Boyle.
and Billy Boyle. Yes.
Hey, congratulations, the Boyle family.
Yes. But so yeah, obviously, because of all the tragedies with the hurricanes, a number of organizations stepped forward, and PAC TV was good enough to sponsor a telethon to try to raise money to send funds back to Florida, Texas, and to Puerto Rico for hurricane relief. And so they got all of us South Shore legislators together.
Man in the phone banks.
Man in the phone banks, yep. And so we did, and we had a serious topic, but we had fun with it, which is, I think, what you need to do. And so we had a telethon and raised, it's pretty generous folks. I think the last count was they'd raised almost $30,000.
And I believe that was being distributed, not only was it, I think, the Plymouth Rotary.
Through the Rotary clubs in other countries.
Right, it was being distributed, and 100% of it would have been, they were going to be able to dole out the money.
Right, so the whole idea is that 100% of what people give was going straight to folks in need, so none of it was for administrative costs, so that's why they use the Rotary Club as sort of a vehicle to do that. So that was a nice thing as well. So yeah,
you also did a special luncheon with State Senator Mike Brady.
Just had a luncheon here at the Hanson Council on Aging. Had a fun time with local seniors doing lunch and kind of having a discussion. So that's something we try to do every once in a while. And Senator Brady was kind enough to join me and pitch in for treating for lunch. So we enjoyed doing that. It was a good time.
Okay. And probably with the last couple of minutes here, you're going to be teaching class in Duxbury. Is that true?
I know, putting me as a teacher, that's a dangerous
Professor
thing.
Cutler? And you're also going to be part of the Promote Prevent committee. They're going to be meeting down here on the South Shore.
Yeah, so I know we're almost out of time, but so there's a commission called the Promote Prevent Commission, which is all about trying to look at best practices for how we are treating the opioid epidemic, but really focused in on a prevention effort, rather than simply just putting resources after the problem has occurred, trying to put more resources into preventing the problem. So promoting prevention, promote, prevent is the idea, education. And that's being chaired by one of our South Shore colleagues, Representative Jim Cantwell from Marshfield. And so they're having, the special commission is coming down to our area to testify, to hold a hearing, here in Plymouth very soon. And so I'm going to be participating in that. And I think it's a good opportunity for folks in the area to kind of, if they're interested, who want to come down, anybody can come in and offer some testimony, share some, perhaps personal experiences. The whole idea is to learn from everyone's input so that we can come up with these best practices and try to make some recommendations back to the state about, hey, here's how we can take some resources and try to put more into preventing the problem so that, we hit the problem before it becomes unsolvable. And so it's called the Promote Prevent Commission, and that's something that I'm pleased to be able to participate in. So.
If folks want to kind of keep up with you, your blog, stuff that you're doing up at the State House, stuff in district, how can they do that?
So my website is the best way to do that. It's just joshcutler.com, or obviously if people are on Facebook, I post regular updates on Facebook, and you can find me there, or Twitter. And I do regular office hours. We do them twice a month at each local senior center. So twice a month here in Hanson or Pembroke or Duxbury. And then I do evening office hours once a month as well at the Pembroke Town Hall. So folks are welcome to stop in anytime. No appointments necessary, and come on by. And so we're going to have to I think we should tape the next show up at the State House, Kevin.
Yeah, I already talked to Ryan. Ryan and I were ready to travel up there and set up the cameras and meet with Cole and some of the other
I got
folks
you on camera. This is good. We're going to do it. We'll make it happen.
Well, we did it last time.
I know.
When you complained about you're like, oh.
I know. I have to compliment you. Thank you for getting rid of the disco ball in the back.
So. But you didn't like the other one that we created for you.
I do. Put it on.
You said you didn't feel like you were the Bruce Wayne-esque type of a guy. So, well, that's all the time we have.
Thank you, sir.
Till the next time we see you, and till the next time we see you, you have been watching CrossTalk, the 6th Plymouth District edition. Until next time, have a great day.